All right, welcome back in here to Live Now from Fox. I am Andy Mack. Thank you so much for joining us. We've talked time and time again about Alligator Alcatraz, and now that temporary immigration detention facility in South Florida will soon be shutting its doors. As you can see this, a post from the Associated Press saying an email shared with the Associated Press shows Alligator Alcatraz will likely be empty within days as it must keep moving towards shutting down operations by late October. A judge has ruled, even as the state and federal governments fight that decision. Let's be joined right now here on the ground in Florida by Fox 13 Tampa's Evan Axelbank. Evan, thank you so much for joining us here on Live Now from Fox. What more can you tell us about this procedure?
Well, good to see you. I don't know if the governor is quite ready to admit yet that Alligator Alcatraz is being shut down, but without a doubt, it does seem like operations are beginning to dwindle there. The question is whether they ramp back up. Alligator Alcatraz had been the most visible piece of Florida's immigration policy. Now, the state has never been precise as to how many people are being held there, but now a place that is built for several thousand people appears to be holding just several people.
Just under 2 months after Alligator Alcatraz had the highest profile opening possible.
I wouldn't want to run through the Everglades for long. It will keep people where they're supposed to be.
The governor admitted there might be more alligators around it than people in it.
I think they've been having rapid removals from Alligator Alcatraz, and I think that's caused the census to go down. But again, you know, that's not necessarily that we control in either direction.
The state's emergency management coordinator told religious leaders in a leaked email that we are probably going to be down to 0 individuals within a few days. That comes just a week after a federal judge found that not doing an environmental assessment of the property first was illegal. She blocked new migrants from being brought in, ordered all construction to stop, and for Alligator Alcatraz to be dismantled within 60 days. Environmental groups had argued the sewage, lights, and human activity were threatening protected habitats.
What the governor's doing is he's just spinning. He's embarrassed and humiliated about the fact that the court is shutting down this very, very important priority for him.
Democrats are pouncing because of the amount of money spent on it. Orlando Democratic Senator Carlos Guillermo Smith says nearly $250 million has been spent on the facility in the form of no-bid contracts signed under the governor's emergency declaration.
So eventually, the truth will come to light, not only about how much money was spent, but who was detained there, for what reasons, under what conditions.
The governor, though, is still appealing the judge's ruling to a higher court, saying the environmental damage is non-existent because all the activity is happening on the tarmac of an old airport. He says the number of people there is so small because DHS is deporting people faster than the state can bring them in.
We have to continue with this mission. It's important, and ultimately it's going to be good for the state of Florida.
Though the state has not provided any real-time counts of how many people are being taken there, how many people are in there, and then also how many people have been flown out of there, and also where those folks are going to.
Yeah, that is a very good point. You also mentioned it off the top, whether this Alligator Alcatraz was a success or not, and it's going to be spun by both sides very much so. Can you kind of tell us how both sides are viewing this right now?
Well, you know, I think, you know, right now the governor says this is a key part of the state's mission. He says this is about giving the state another place to bring migrants. Florida is woefully short on the number of beds that it has. It's called beds, you know, one location for a detainee. And so because the state is so short, they were desperate for space because they had more people, frankly, being taken into custody than they could process out. So the Republicans, and particularly Governor DeSantis and his closest allies, say this was a critical thing to do because they needed the space to bring detainees who, according to them, were getting their final deportation orders or who already had their final deportation orders. Democrats say this was a boondoggle, that it was a giveaway to the governor's biggest donors because, according to them, he gave them no-bid contracts, that this emergency order that he did all of this under was done under essentially a false emergency, and that Alligator Alcatraz also had difficult conditions for people to live in. Now, the governor disputed all that, but Democrats also said, look, and environmentalists also said, look, there was no environmental impact study done. There was nothing done to make sure that putting 3,000 or 4,000 people in the middle of the swamp, if you include both detainees and also people who were working there, there could have been up to 4,000 people there. And putting that number of people in the middle of the swamp, environmentalists said, would be bound to impact the environment. And again, this is a very environmentally sensitive area. So that's how both sides, both major parties would spin it. But without a doubt, people are going to see what they want to see in this. And then I guess the question is whether the public is going to be convinced one way or the other that this was a worthy project or not.
I want to ask you, because you mentioned some of those key facets, the environmental study, could they lean on the fact that this was just temporary, right? It's not like this was ever going to be permanent no matter when it closed, right now or sometime in the future. This was always just kind of a stopgap of sorts for this immigration crackdown.
That was generally the argument, but without any actual deadlines being given of when they were planning to wind things down, it was hard to see how temporary it could be. This was never billed as a short-term 2-month thing. It certainly seemed like they were planning on having this around for longer than that. In some ways, it could have been seen as temporary because once hurricane season came, there's, of course, a major risk that a hurricane would force an evacuation. You say, well, it's just in one part of the state, but now we've seen storms that are so big that they force a third or half of the state to be evacuated in one shot. We've seen several storms go right up the spine of Florida or go across the southwestern part of Florida. I can think of 2 or 3 hurricanes where this would have been directly in the path of, or at least in an area that was evacuated. So I don't think there's any doubt that the temporary nature of it is impacted by hurricane season, but it does seem like 2 months is a shorter time than had been promised.
Yeah, I was going to bring up hurricane season as well, so you beat me to it, but it's going to be interesting to see how this is a case study for other different temporary immigration detention facilities that other states have proposed. All right, Evan, thank you so much. No, if you want to go ahead.
Oh, yeah, sorry. I was just going to say, the governor has said this is something that other states should emulate. Missouri had something, oh gosh, I don't remember what Missouri's was going to be, but Missouri is doing something along similar lines. But I think nothing had this sort of, if you permit the use of the term, the kitsch that this kind of a facility had in the Everglades, because it was marketed as, hey, we don't just have armed guards here, we have alligators here, Alligator Alcatraz. It was such a catchy name, and that was not just a name that the either supporters or detractors gave to it. It was a name that the state of Florida, that the governor himself put on the facility. So yeah, it is something that he is, hoping burnishes his credentials as he considers whether to run for president in 2028.
Yeah, that's very interesting. You mentioned kind of those environmental, the nature around it, not the same in places like Missouri or Indiana. Those environments a little bit different.
Nowhere is like the Everglades, I can promise you that.
Yeah, well, I can only imagine. All right, Evan, thank you so much. I appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us.